Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. I am your host, Jordan Reed. You can follow me on Twitter at JReedNFL. Again, that's JREID NFL. Shoot me a follow on there. It'd be greatly appreciated. I have a jam-packed episode for you guys today. It's the official first day of practice, and I could not be more excited. The guys are back in pads, the guys are back on the field. They're not quite yet in pads. I got a little bit ahead of myself. You can tell how excited I am just to see guys back on the field. All the veterans reported yesterday. And I'm just so excited to see all the guys back on the field with the new addition of Kirk Cousins, Sheldon Richardson, Linval Joseph, and many more. Xavier Rhodes, Harrison Smith, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen. I'm just so excited to see all the guys back together, and I'm ready to see how they compete against each other. Even more new additions with the rookies and Mike Hughes, Brian O'Neill. Those guys have already been here for a couple of days, but now they're going to be in the mix with the veterans that are back now. But there's so many training camp storylines, from Dalvin Cook and Pat Elflein returning from injury, Kirk Cousins being the new leader in charge, the new quarterback under center, and much, much more. How does the defensive line mesh together with the addition of Sheldon Richardson? How does Mike Hughes adjust to the speed of the game? There's just so many storylines that are going to be flying left and right. But the biggest one that I want to focus on today is how Kirk Cousins can prove his worth to the Minnesota Vikings. He signed an $84 million deal, the first fully guaranteed contract in NFL history. But now it's put up or shut up time. And with that big contract comes higher expectations. And that's what Kirk Cousins is entering this year. Now that he's in Minnesota, he's got his money. He has that comfortable situation that he's been wanting forever that he never really got in Washington. But I want to go back a couple days. Kirk Cousins said some really interesting things in his press conference on Thursday. So here's a quote that he was saying, and the biggest thing that he talked about was leadership. And there's a lot of interesting points that he made within this. Here's his quote. So you insert the quote right here. I thought Kirk Cousins said a lot of phenomenal things within that quote. And the biggest thing is that it was centered around leadership. And that's something that Kirk Cousins is really going to have to exemplify now that he is the head man in charge. He's this guy that's going to spearhead John DeFilippo's offensive attack. John DeFilippo is counting on him. This fan base is counting on him. Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen is counting on him. And there's a host of other guys that's counting on him. And this is a big season for Kirk Cousins. Not only for him, but for this organization. He comes in with super high expectations because now he is one of the top paid quarterbacks in the NFL. At the time, the Vikings gave him the richest contract in NFL history for a quarterback. So there's a lot of expectations surrounding Kirk Cousins, and he has never been in a situation like this. And what I mean by that is he's never had a full complementary of weapons He's never had a full complement of weapons like this Vikings team has. And I'm not just talking about the offense. I'm talking about the defense as well. He has Diggs and Thielen and Rudolph. He has Dalvin Cook behind him. And then when they're not on the field, they have the number one defense in the entire NFL to turn to. So this team has a great recipe for success, and I expect them to have a lot of success this year. But let's stay on topic. We're going to talk about what Kirk Cousins can do to prove his worth and how he can live up to this massive contract that he signed. First and foremost, Kirk Cousins has to set realistic expectations for himself, and the fan base has to set realistic expectations of Kirk Cousins and recognize who he is. Now, who is Kirk Cousins? I think he's a guy that is a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. He's not in that upper echelon or elite category because he's not a guy that can uplift his surrounding cast consistently. He's a guy that if you build a situation and you insert him into that situation, I think he's the guy that can fit into that mix perfectly. And that's what he is in Minnesota. The supporting cast is already ready-made. He has weapons on the perimeter, a really good running back in the backfield. Now, the offensive line does have some question marks, but if you're a quarterback of his caliber, you should be able to overcome that. And that's what they're going to expect of Kirk Cousins. Now, and that's not to say that if the offensive line is completely disastrous, that he's going to be able to escape the pocket consistently and be able to make plays off the script, because that's just not his game. Like a Russell Wilson does consistently in Seattle, that's just not who Kirk Cousins is. What I'm saying is that he has to be the orchestrator of this offense and keep this thing on script continuously throughout the season. And I compared to Case Keenum last year because Case Keenum had an outlier season, but those are the floor expectations for Kirk Cousins. And I don't want to say it's a bit unfair to him, but you go out and you give him this rich contract. These are the baseline expectations that you have of him because you moved on from Case Keenum, and the Vikings don't want to take a step down from Case Keenum because that wouldn't be a return on their investment. Their expectations start at the floor of the season that Case Keenum had last year, and they expect Kirk Cousins to be that player that can get them over the hump. So Case Keenum season from a year ago, those are the baseline expectations for him. But I want to get back on the subject of what Kirk Cousins was talking about with his leadership. And I think he's done a fantastic job. I think him showing up to rookie camp early on, I thought that exemplified great leadership. Yes, he's a starting quarterback, but there's not a lot of times that the starting quarterback does show up to these rookie camps. I know Kyle Sluter, Trevor Siemian, and a host of other quarterbacks showed up, but it's really good that Kirk Cousins was there because that's showing his team that he's all in on this thing and he wants to get them over the hump. He knows that they were one game away from winning. They were one game away from playing in the Super Bowl and maybe potentially winning it, basically because it would have been a home game for the Minnesota Vikings. But that's in the rearview mirror. They're focusing on the 2018 season, and that's what Kirk Cousins is trying to instill in everybody is that let's move on from the NFC Championship game. It's a new season. I'm the new guy in charge, and I want to make sure I leave my blueprint or I want to leave my stamp on this team because I'm the new guy in charge. I'm the new general. I'm the big money guy. So I want to exemplify every type of leadership that I can show for this team, and that's exactly what he's going to have to do because it's just the nature of the beast at the quarterback position. When things are going good, everyone's going to blame. When things are going good, everyone is going to give him the praise. But when things are going bad, everyone is going to glorify him and focus on him because that's just what comes with playing the quarterback position. And that's what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. The Vikings are going to face some bumps in the road this season because no season is perfect. That's just how things go. We saw it last year where the Vikings faced plenty of ups and downs last year, and everyone pointed the finger right at Case Keenum. It's just the nature of the beast of the quarterback position. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. He's going to have some trying times throughout the year where he's going to have to step up and be that high paid. There's going to be some times during the year where he's going to have to step up and be that highly paid guy that they expect him to be. And there's going to be some lowlights that he has throughout the year. That's just what's going to happen during the season because nobody can expect this thing to be perfect. And that's what I mean by the fans have to set realistic expectations, not only for Kirk Cousins, but for this offense as well. There's a lot of new pieces. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have a new quarterback. So if this team gets off to a slow start, it shouldn't scare fans because there's so many moving new parts. And those are two very important positions. You're trying to implement Dalvin Cook back into the offense, a guy that only played 4 games last year. So they've got to find a fine line or a good mixture of how they can get Kirk Cousins in chemistry with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, but also how they can get Dalvin Cook back on track and still mix in Latavius Murray as well. So there's a lot of moving parts of this offense. John DeFilippo also has to get back used to calling plays as well. So if this team gets off to a slow start, it would not scare me at all. And actually, it's something that I really expect because the defense is always ahead of the offense. That's every team in the country. And just because it's so much easier to create chemistry on defense because it's not reliant on one player. I don't like that. It's so much easier to create chemistry on defense because one player can save the day on defense. One player can make a tackle and save the day. But offense, everybody has to work in cohesion. All 11 players on the field have to be on the same page. But if one person messes up, it can derail the entire drive. And that's what we've seen out of Vikings offenses in years past. There's one person that messes up and it just derails an entire drive. But on defense, Xavier Rhodes or Harrison Smith or Eric Kendricks or Anthony Barr can come in and make a tackle. Danielle Hunter or Everson Griffin can make a sack, and it saves the day. That's the big difference between offense and defense, and that's something that we're going to see next season, I believe. I think the defense is going to be phenomenal from day one. I expect them to pick up exactly where they left off prior to the NFC Championship game, and even that second half that they played in New Orleans, which wasn't great, or against New Orleans, which wasn't great, I expect them to pick up where they left off in the regular season. I think this defense is going to be really good. Now, let's flip the script, or let's flip to the other side of the ball. I think this offense has potential to be really, really good, but I don't think we're going to see it probably until October, maybe until about the 5th or 6th game of the year. I think that's really where they're going to start to click and hit their stride. But early on, coming out the gate, I don't expect them just to come out guns blazing and just be the greatest show on turf. I just don't think that's realistic for this offense because there's so many moving parts. But ultimately, how can Kirk Cousins prove his worth? Of course, everyone is going to say win. That's the most logical answer. And that's just such a cliche answer because everyone wants to win. If Kirk Cousins is able to keep this offense on script, if he's able to exceed most of the numbers that he put up in Washington, which is debatable, which he may be able to do because he's going to have more opportunities with such a great defense in front of him, or such a great defense on his side. Now he's going to get ample opportunities to throw touchdowns, to operate extremely efficient drives, and help this offense create chemistry and click. I really think he's going to have a breakout season. He's been my breakout candidate for months now, and I really like what he's doing so far. I like the leadership that he's exemplifying. He's shown that he's developed some chemistry with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. You're starting to see him more active even on social media. And Kirk Cousins has really never been a social media type of guy, but that's showing just his comfort level and how comfortable he's getting in Minnesota in this situation with the new quarterback under center. And he understands the expectations, and I'm sure he's going to be a bit nervous. That's just human nature, and he knows what's at stake for this season, and I know he wants the best for this season and for himself as well and for this team. But he just can't come out trying to do too much, and he just needs to stay on script with everything that he does in this offense and just operate it at an extremely high level. If he's able to win, of course, operate this offense at an extremely efficient and high level by midseason, or early to midseason. And if he's able to improve in some certain areas like red zone efficiency, what I like to call the clutch gene, which he hasn't been great in the past, but we saw some moments where he was clutch last year, especially against New Orleans and Seattle, where he was just phenomenal in both of those games, where he just orchestrated great drives to go down the field and just score touchdowns. We've seen these bright spots of Kirk Cousins. Now, if he's able to put all that together, I think the Vikings are going to have themselves a prototypical franchise quarterback and a guy that they haven't had since the days of a guy like a Dante Culpepper over an extended period of time. And if the Vikings are able to create that stability at quarterback, this team could be very dangerous. If Kirk Cousins is able to click with Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, and John DeFilippo is able to find that fine line or great mixture of chemistry to fit Dalvin Cook into this offense, I think this offense can be extremely explosive, and everyone's already accepted Kirk Cousins as the quarterback and the leader of this offense. Now, if he's able to have a very successful first year with the Vikings, now we're talking about him transitioning to being the face of the franchise type guy on offense, which is something that the Vikings don't necessarily have right now. And I think Stephon Diggs is that guy, but it's because the Vikings have so much uncertainty at quarterback. And if Kirk Cousins is able to step up and have a really good year this year, whenever somebody mentions the Minnesota Vikings, the first person that they're going to think of is Kirk Cousins. And that's what I like to call a face of the franchise type of player. Whenever you mention that team, who is the first player that you think of? If Kirk Cousins is able to have a successful year this year and have a breakout year this year, like many are expecting him to, he can turn into that prototypical franchise player and that prototypical face of the franchise quarterback.